right, everybody. Welcome to Time Chat. I am your host, Ben Thayer. I thank you for coming and attending our program today. I'm hoping we're having a very exciting program for you. We are taping live from CNN today, the Colonial News Network. I know. I need like a rim shot back here or something. So anyway, what we're going to do today, actually before we begin, we have a special guest here with Connie Kehoe, who's president and director of Revolutionary Westchester 250. Some of y'all might have heard that there's a whole lot of anniversaries coming up here in the next few years. And Connie has been doing tremendous work in raising awareness about this and planning events and such in Westchester. And I wanted to turn the microphone over to Connie for a couple of minutes just to have her say a few words here. Connie.
Thank you, Michael. Or you're not Michael. Well, spread the word, you guys. You are here, so you are the aware. But in 2026, that year will be the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution, of the founding of the country. So President Obama in 2016 said it would take 10 years to plan this. So I've been doing this for 5 years. So we're getting ready. But here in Westchester, so much happened in the Revolution. And a lot happened right here around this site in Yonkers. So my team and I will be here downstairs all day, and we'll be able to tell you about some upcoming things this fall, as well as things that are planned for the next 2 years. But overall, we promote the things that we think are really worthy of the public coming to, and this site is key. So much happened here. So much of what they are doing here at this site in Yonkers is so important that we make a point of trying to publicize every single thing. So I saw this show once before, but I'm here again. So thank you, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Connie. Pardon me here. Ordinarily, I prefer to remain standing during my introductions and such. Circumstances, however, with my leg necessitate my seated posture. This is my first day back to Time Chat after our Talk Like a Pirate or Act Like a Pirate episode where I inadvertently mixed up my vowels and my letters saying R. Well, actually saying I instead of R, which is a big problem when Calico Jack asked if I wanted a peg leg. So a lot of work went into the reattachment, and I'm happy to be back, sort of on my feet. Today is July 13th. It is the 194th day of the year, except in a leap year like this year. Now it's the 195th day. Go figure. But it's been another eventful day in history. On this day, on the 13th of July, I want to wish a happy Montenegro Statehood Day. All right? Not to be confused with Montenegro's Independence Day, which was in May. But shall we rise now and sing Montenegro's national anthem? Oj Svetla, Majka Zoro? Anybody? I thought, okay, never mind. Anyone. Today in history also, both Patrick Stewart, you might know him from Star Trek The Next Generation, right? And Harrison Ford, old Han Solo, celebrate birthdays, same day. Now, I never really knew much about the feud between like the Star Wars universe and the Federation universe. And when we ran that Galactic Empire or United Federation of Planets episode, who knew that Darth Vader and Q were going to get into it so much? And frankly, I don't think anybody is going boldly into that galaxy far, far away anymore. Big problem. But leaving that aside, let's move on to today's show. Now, today's show, where is a very special program. Yeah, can I help you, ma'am?
I was invited to participate by your assistant. Do you not know who I am?
No, I'm not aware. Who are you?
Mr. Thayer, your assistant, Miss That, and offered for me to join you. Alice Roosevelt?
Oh, Alice Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's daughter, folks. Alice Roosevelt, Mrs. Roosevelt. We've got one small issue. The Wayward Presidential Children episode is next week. Not. Well, unfortunately, I appreciate that you have arrived here, and, well, serendipitously, can I ask you as a favor, because our director of group spontaneity, Dawn That, is out today. Would you do us the honor of taking her position as the person who handles all of our group reactions?
Well, I was planning to see a man about a horse this afternoon, so sure, yes.
Oh, indeed. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Roosevelt. Let me get what you need. All right, everybody, Director of Spontaneity Interactions. Let's hear it for Miss Alice Roosevelt. How's that? Even better. And when we say something shocking, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Roosevelt.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris.
Moving on. Today's episode is our second annual Loyalist or Patriot program. We had such a good time last year, we had to bring back another group for a discussion about their choices during the American Revolution. Now, for the audience, that's you guys, please remember that our people are from the past. Now, in general, they are New Yorkers who may or may not yet have chosen a side during the American Revolution, but for our guests, their year is 1781. It is actually the end of 1781. The battle at Yorktown in Virginia has already taken place. Now, I know y'all don't have to be historians to be a part of this, so let me fill you in a little. Cornwallis's surrender at Yorktown was a major defeat for the British, but it did not mark the end of the American Revolution. Whether a patriot or a loyalist, it's still up in the air as to who is going to become victorious in these battles for American independence or to remain as British citizens. The war has been terrible and tragic. The events in the life of these men and women who are going to be brought on stage they're going to tell you about those terrors and those tragedies that they've experienced. Thousands of lives have been lost since 1775 in this war. Families have been separated, torn apart. It's hard to imagine, really, the hardships and the fear of what might be next for New Yorkers. As the British Army has remained and remains in Manhattan, and the Continental Forces are in New Jersey, not too far away, and things could still get quite heated. So keep in mind, most of Westchester County at this point, where we are here, it's been nothing more than a no man's land since about 1776, so for the last 5 years or so. British forces in Manhattan, American forces up in the Highlands north here, have been constantly raiding local farms for food, for lumber, harassing anyone who has pledged allegiance to which other side they happen to be on. Our guests do not have the luxury of knowing how or when this war will end or who will win. Do you guys know who wins? Okay. If you don't, you'll find out. But nevertheless, if you do know, keep it to yourself, because we don't want to spoil this for anybody up here thinking that they're going to have some extra information that nobody else has. This may lead to some disagreements up here because our patriots and our loyalists have permission to speak freely. I don't expect those disagreements to become particularly violent. Hopefully it won't dissolve into that spectacle that we had a few years ago with Goth or Visigoth. That was a bad one. But if possible, refrain from too many modern references if you can. They've been prepared for cameras, for microphones, for lighting and things like that. But, if you've got one of those smartwatches or a cell phone, y'all going to get, accused of being a witch. So just be careful with all of that. Without further ado, let me introduce today's guests for our Loyalist or Patriot program. Born in Connecticut, a graduate of Yale College. At one time, he was actually a tutor to Frederick Phillips III's children, a dedicated patriot. He worked his way up to the rank of lieutenant colonel and is currently serving as aide-de-camp to General George Washington. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel David Humphreys. Lieutenant Colonel, we had hoped that most of our weapons would have been left at the door, should there be any, passions aroused. So would you please be kind enough to surrender your sword to Mrs. Roosevelt? Thank you, sir. Originally from Orange County, New York, she has chosen a difficult path by accompanying her husband, Aaron, as a camp follower with the Continental Army. A very warm welcome for Mrs. Sarah Osborne. Good day, Mrs. Osborne.
Good morning.
Born to a Wangan mother and an African father near Hartford, Connecticut, he left his home for Newport, Rhode Island, where he worked as a carter. A free man and heir to land in Connecticut, he then joins the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment as a drummer. Give it up for Mr. Scipio Two Shoes. Well, Mr. Two Shoes, you also have a sword. Would you be willing to surrender this to Mrs. Roosevelt?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I like how our president's daughter is taking all the weapons. Now, she is the daughter of a very respectable Hudson Valley Dutch family from Kingston. After her marriage, the couple built a modern Georgian home and prospered through very important commercial dealings in milling and in trade. Recently, their home has been occupied, and it's been occupied as the headquarters of Patriot General Henry Knox. Please welcome Mrs. Catherine Ellison. Mrs. Ellison, you will be right here next to Mr. Two Shoes. All right, this next gentleman is a native of Maryland, of the Pocomoke people, who were forced to relocate and settle in northeastern Pennsylvania, and now out near Oswego, New York. Please welcome Pekatawas Makatawayu, better known as Black Corn. Mr. Corn, I see you've come, you must have missed the people downstairs to surrender your weapons. Would you be so kind to allow Mrs. Roosevelt to take, let's see, your musket, your hatchet, your blade? Thank you, sir. She is a formerly enslaved woman who self-emancipated, risking her life to find freedom for both herself and her daughter, all the way from Charleston, South Carolina, and currently living behind British lines in New York City, Miss Lucy Bloom. Mrs. Bloom. Oh, is there something hidden? Oh, more. Thank you for surrendering these sharp scissors. I'm glad you weren't running. And finally, she is a former resident of this house that we are actually in, of Phillips Manor Hall, one of the wealthiest residents of New York, married to British Army officer Colonel Roger Morris, and back at her own stomping grounds here in Yonkers for the first time in years, welcome Mary Phillips Morris. Madam Morris. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you for our Loyalist or Patriot program. You are welcome to take your seats behind you. Now, although each person is seated under the respective portraits of their Georges, right? We have King George and George Washington up there. Some of our guests may not feel a particularly strong adherence to one side or the other. We might find that out as we go through. To our ladies and gentlemen here upon the dais, welcome. Thank you for allowing us thank you for attending this charrette. Each of you has a very compelling story. I have invited you here to share your experiences with our audience. Now, here in this room, there are no secrets. You may consider the guest sitting to your left or across the table from me as your enemy or as your friend. You may hear information that could change the advantage of one army or the other. But for the purpose of this program, what happens at Phillips Manor Hall stays at Phillips Manor Hall. I also want to thank you for consenting to surrender your weapons, both backstage and here with Mrs. Roosevelt. I must confess I was a little taken aback how many of those weapons were actually primed and loaded. But also remember that your coaches and your horses are also being tended to our interns downstairs as well. So, shall we begin? We will have questions from the audience later too, so please, if you have any, write them down, put them down on your hand as you can. But let's begin actually with a little background for our audience from each of our guests to fill them in a little bit about your histories and why you are here. Let's begin with Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys. If you could say a few words about yourself.
I'm a native of Connecticut. I first became involved in actually fighting in the war when I ended up in New York City with the Connecticut militia. I saw my first action at the Battle of Kips Bay, where the Army was defeated, and then fought at Harlem Heights. I returned to Connecticut, and then a short time later joined the Continental Army as an officer. I was initially with the 6th Massachusetts Regiment, before I was selected to be an aide-de-camp to General Parsons, and then later Major General Israel Putnam. And when he had his unfortunate stroke, I became an aide-de-camp to General Nathaniel Greene. And in that capacity, I was selected by Washington to become one of his aides-de-camp. Since I've served as Washington's aide-de-camp, and I carried the battle flags captured from the British Army at Yorktown and laid them at the feet of Congress, and that's when I became a lieutenant colonel.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Mrs. Osborne, what brings you here?
So, my story starts out when I marry my first husband, William Reed. Sadly, he had passed in the early battles of the Revolution. And I would then later marry Aaron Osborne. I was a very notable camp follower, and my most notable experience was being at Yorktown.
Thank you, Mrs. Osborne. Mr. Two Shoes, what brings you out here today?
Well, I was born in Connecticut in 1725, and my mother is Wangunk, and my father was African. And between there, I traveled to Rhode Island to go, meet my wife. It's quite a journey, let me tell you, things we do for women. And, now I'm involved in the war and drumming. I was actually captured by the British and enslaved at one point, and, freed by the Americans and brought back as a drummer. I'm very happy and excited about this. But I can't wait till we're done this war and we get these Brits out of here. It's just...
I got you. Thank you, sir. And Mrs. Ellison, ma'am?
My name is Catherine Janssen Ellison. I'm originally from Kingston, New York. Married to my husband. He is an Englishman, and we reside now in New Windsor. We are from a merchant and milling family. My father-in-law hosted General Washington last year. We just most recently currently hosted General Knox and his family prior to them leaving. The house has been incredibly loud with all of the Army in and out. So we're certainly hoping to go back to just my husband and myself.
Indeed. Thank you. Mr. Blackhorn.
Nagtatangon si pagkatawas magadaway pagmoch tanapinach pila lanunay.
Excuse me, Mr. Blackhorn. I am not sure if our audience is familiar with your language or quite that familiar.
You wish for me to speak in English?
Can you?
Yes.
Would you? Thank you.
Fortunately, when I was a child, I was born in a place called Askaminakansan. The English call it that. Our people call it Askamukasan or Askamankansen means the place where we pitch our boats or the place where we gather our hickory nuts. It is in a beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful flat land with cypress trees and deep black water and good flat land for planting. As a child, our people were divided. The colony of Maryland decided to abolish our reservation, and our people were torn. Some of our people decided to stay in our homelands. Some of our people decided to go west. My parents, my mother and I and my father decided to go north with the Nantigo people. And we just first went to Pennsylvania. And that is where I learned to speak English with your Moravians, who taught me English and they taught me some German. We lived there for a time, and then after Pontiac's Great War, things became hard for the Indian people who had not accepted Jesu into their heart. And so for those of us who wished to cling and stay to our old ways, we had to move farther north. And so as a young man, I have moved to Oswego with a village of Pogamoch, Nantigoch people, and we live in the country of the Haudenosaunee.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bloom, Miss Bloom?
Miss Bloom.
Miss Bloom, what brings you here today, besides my invitation?
Well, I don't want you to think that I'm a gossip or anything. But to get started, the way that I showed up here, all the way from South Carolina, is I overheard Mr. Bloom and Mrs. Bloom. That's where I get my last name from, because they were the people holding me enslaved. Heard them having an awful fight at tea one day. Something about something going on in England, and some Lord Judge set black folks free. And the next thing you know, they're fighting and fussing about black folks getting equality over there in England. Now, I don't know if there's such a thing that's true, but I did hear them fighting about it. And so I thought, well, that seems like a good deal. And next thing you know, there's folks saying that if you are enslaved by somebody who is in rebellion to the king, you can get your freedom. Well, I took a chance. I took my daughter and we headed out. And here we are in New York, and that is how we ended up here. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but they sure do have us working here, and they are feeding us, so it seems like it might be true. They have plans to send us someplace else no matter what happens. And so what I do know is what was behind me. I may not know what's in front of me, but that is how I ended up here.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mrs. Morris, Mary Phillips Morris, welcome home.
Yes, thank you. It's been a while, hasn't it? Well, I suppose I can introduce myself, can't I? My name is Mary Phillips Morris. My great-grandfather came to New York 4 generations ago, so we have been here for nearly 100 years. Over 100 years, actually, now that I think about it. I am married to retired British Army Colonel Roger Morris. He has returned to us, thankfully. He was forced to flee the violence in New York City. I have been wrongfully turned out of many homes. First, my beautiful Mount Morris on the Harlem River, which your patriots took over, thankfully in their retreat from New York City. So the British, of course, now hold New York City. And then also turned out of this house, where I and my children had come to escape the violence, to be with my brother, who was imprisoned by George Washington, and forcing my sister-in-law and the children to be here on our own as armies are massed around us. And finally, we were forced to flee to New York City. And now, just 2 years ago, the rebel government has claimed our lands as their own through their Act of Attainder. And of course, I, my sister, Susanna Phillips, our brother, Frederick Phillips III, we have all been targeted to seize our lands. So we remain in what is left of New York City under British protection, thankfully. But I have been deprived of many things in my life, sir, and I am not happy about it.
As I can tell. But thank you, Mrs. Morris. Let me ask a particular question for Mrs. Ellison. As you were coming in, Mrs. Ellison, you seemed a little bit unsure as to which George to sit under. We currently have you on the American side, as you could see from the flag. But I want to ask you, your house is occupied by General Henry Knox, and you're sharing your house with the Continental Forces, essentially. Do you trust either side in this fight?
Absolutely not.
Why is
We
that?
have not chosen sides. My father-in-law felt it best that we remain neutral and we remain quiet. My brother-in-law and family are trapped in New York City with our shipping business. We are renting out our home to several generals. We have over 6,000 acres of land. My father-in-law felt it best that we just stay quiet, even though the committees of safety are constantly investigating us for too much butter, too much salt, and getting into our storehouses, making snide comments behind my husband's back about how he's difficult to deal with the Army, even though
He
they
is
want
difficult
more.
to deal with.
My Johnny's never been difficult to deal with.
Seem to have some disagreements even on one side of this war here. Mr. Korn, you also
I was
seem
about
to be
to say
between-
that all of you are difficult, and you have been since the time of your fathers and their fathers before them.
For sure.
Gasp. Are you solidly on the British side in this? I know that other members of your community feel the way you do, or has your family essentially been split?
These times have been very hard for our people. There are some of us who live in the Haudenosaunee, the country of the Haudenosaunee, who have heard the words of Tyondonega, your Joseph Brant. Brant has come to many of our councils and said, "Brothers, listen, you should fight for King George. He is our great father, and we are loyal to him. We are his sons. And we must defend this great place because your younger brothers, these Americans, they are unruly, and they need to listen to their fathers once more." And he says if we fight for King George and we win this war for him, King George promises that he will honor our agreements. He will honor our treaties. He
What
will
are the
honor the
chances of
agreements.
that?
And you, why do you fight for them? They wish to keep you in chains, do they not?
They did on the British side, but the Americans seem to be treating me
You
okay.
are Wongung. You could have country of your own. The British promise you this.
What?
I've moved along and done other things now. I'm making my own way.
And this causes great pain in our hearts because like this gentleman here who have accepted Jesu in their hearts, who have left the old way, who have abandoned the Masing, who have abandoned the old way, they have put Jesus into their hearts and they have let all others go. Him, Ninum, others. They listen to many others. Some who have not even accepted Jesu into their hearts, they listen to White Eyes, Sukima White Eyes of the Delaware. And he says of this great Washington, that Washington, if you fight for him, Washington shall make us the 13th colony, this 13th place. And still others say, we should not fight for anyone. This is a fight between father and son, that we are not meant to fight this great war. And some of us say we should go to Gichigumi, that we should go to the Great Lakes, and we should fish there and wait for this war to be done. I fight for King George because I believe he will do what is best for our people, and that his people will honor their agreements. They will honor our treaties. These colonists, they lie, and they've consisted to lie. They do not listen to their fathers or their fathers' agreements. They consistently do not tell the truth. I cannot fight for these people.
Mr. Two Shoes, I understand that you had said that you were born a free man, and yet the English had enslaved you, and then you've been refreed again by American troops. Is this why you choose to fight on the American side?
Well, this is part of it, but it's just the British will take advantage of whoever they can. They're just trying to win a war and move on with their taxes like they've been doing.
Yes.
I don't know about that. I don't know how you can sit there and actually fight for a side that you know is going to enslave you. It seems ridiculous to me.
Well, I'm free
Know
with the
anything
Americans.
about King George? Never met him.
You are
I
one.
do know what a Virginian is like. And I know that is what General George Washington is. And while you can sit there and think the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, it's still a devil.
I have many brothers in the First Rhode Island who would beg to differ, and soon we're going to get pensions.
And these brothers, they are Narragansett. Would you not wish to live in a country with them, a country of your own, where you could live and be a part of the great King's Council in London?
Where your generations would be free.
We're
Not
fighting
just
for
you.
freedom now, where there's talks of equality for everyone.
Free to do
Free-
what? Free to kill for them?
Free for who?
Well, they're fighting on either side. Everybody's dying. Everybody's going to kill. What difference does it make?
What you die for.
I see that both sides here, both American members of America as well as the English, have thought and written about freedom and equality. We have an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson stating that all men are created equal. I mean, beautiful words. Also recall, as you were alluding to, Ms. Bloom, about the Somerset versus Stuart case in 1772 in England, where Lord Mansfield noted in his decision to free Somerset, a man who was enslaved in England, he writes, "The case of slavery is so odious that nothing can be suffered to support it." So both sides have made an argument, essentially, for the freedom, the equality of everyone. However, neither has outlawed slavery at this point. So what does freedom and liberty mean to you and members of your family if those promises of freedom are there but have not been realized? Why choose either side for that matter?
I heard I'm sorry, ma'am, what is your name?
Mrs. Morris.
Mrs. Morris talk about what she suffered, all the indignities that she had to go through, and how hard her life has been. Well, I from where I'm sitting, I don't know that doesn't look so hard to me. But who am I to judge? But I do know what hardship is. I do know what work is. I do know what it is to feel like you don't have a place in this world. And so freedom to me would be peace of mind, having everything that you need and being everything that you can be. That's more than I could dream of for myself. I'm old now. My life is near done, but my daughter has a chance at a different life. That is what I care about. Actually seeing my next generation, the descendants of my family, not struggling the way that I did. I don't know if having fine jewelry and fine clothes means that you are well at peace. I don't know, but it sure does look nice. Sure does look like something I would like to try.
Well, speaking of generations, I have suffered not the same hardships as you, but I have suffered hardships because my children will not be able to inherit anything.
Oh, my.
The multiple generations of my family that have built up our lands, our homes, our properties, our businesses, my children will inherit none of it because it has been taken from them by the patriots, so-called patriots.
Goodness,
Then
they're
you
nothing more than thieves. Nothing more than thieves.
Then you and I are in the same place, Miss Morris. Because what will my children inherit? Their country is being taken from them day after day. The great father of the English says if that we win this war for him, he will honor the agreements. And he will make sure he apologizes to us. He says, my sons, my children, they do not listen to me. I give them law and I give them words, and they choose not to listen. You are their older brothers, and you must bring them into the fold, and sometimes the older brother must discipline the younger brother. And this is what some of us have chosen to do, to bring our younger brothers back into the fold, to bring them in the wigwam with their fathers, so that their fathers can talk to them and speak to them, and they can sit together as men. Our younger brother is young, and he is foolish, and he has been for many generations. It is time for them to grow into men and honor their agreements.
Is menacing how you speak of a conversation? What of Wyoming Valley or
And
Cherry
what of
Valley?
Sullivan's campaign, where you burned all the Oneida's cornfields, you torched their women, their children, and you took their food from their bellies? Tell me of Sullivan's campaign.
In retaliation for the tax along the frontier.
A child harmed you? A child suckling at their mother's breast? That child harmed you. And you burned their fields to the ground to teach them what? To take their country from them. Because we know you have no money. We see your tattered clothes. We see your hungry bellies asking us for food and then turning on us once you have that food. And you take their corn and you take their land because you have nothing. And people who have nothing want something. Do not come to me after what I've seen at Sullivan's campaign and have seen the women with the burns on their arm and the women with cut hair and blackened faces crying and mourning children that are gone. Do not come to me with these things.
We're going to have more on that. I do want to ask Mrs. Osborne. You've heard the words of Mary Phillips and the hardships that she has endured by having her houses occupied and have been tainted of attainder and losing her property and her land. But she still is a woman of means. And these inconveniences...
Much reduced.
A much reduced woman of means, but a woman nonetheless who was the wealthiest woman in New York for quite some time. Mrs. Osborne, you are a woman of little means, and you've had to follow your husbands behind the lines of these American troops. What kinds of hardships have you had to endure with having no home whatsoever?
So, in my case, I have seen starvation, I have seen illness, I have worked in order to provide for this war effort. For example, right now I am in Pompton Plains in little more than a log and canvas construction. I have been with the Army. I understand what it is like to sacrifice life and limb for a cause that you believe in.
You've also recently been in Virginia at the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, is that right?
Yes, sir, and I can speak to the destruction that has happened. And you say that you fight for the British, yet I have seen the plethora of African bodies that were left to starve at Yorktown.
Is that right, Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys? You were there as well? No?
There were a number of people turned out from the British lines during the siege, though many of them tried to stay between the two opposing armies.
Did persons of African descent suffer more so than others behind these lines? Is it due to disease?
Once again, the British just using what they can.
I can't imagine that you would think that Africans would suffer any more anywhere than they do more so under slavery. There's nothing that compares to that. And so if you are starving, if you do fall sick, fighting for your freedom, better so than doing so laboring for someone else's good. It is disgusting to think that anyone would even dream that an African would feel any less by fighting for their freedom. It would be an honor to starve for that.
You were lured in with the guise of freedom, yet when food was low, you were the first people to be cast out.
Do you consider Scipio your brother?
Absolutely.
Why do you not give him a gun? You give him a drum. Is he not a man to you?
He is absolutely a man to me.
Then where is his gun?
Well, I am quite old for fighting age, 50, 55 here, but this drum makes it a lot more simpler
A
for me.
warrior is a warrior. Does not matter.
Yet
They
Lieutenant
treat
Colonel
you like a
over here,
boy. They give you no gun. They strip
officers
you of
did
your
not
things of
even
merit.
I
carry
command-
guns.
And the skill of drumming just can't be on anybody.
So let me understand what you're saying. We should not like the British. We should not side with the British because they cast Africans out first. Is that what you are saying?
When times get tough, you are the first people that they say are worthy enough to go.
That is always. There is no white man on this planet that's going to do anything for black people first. And so having the honor to fight for my freedom or to escape the misery, if it means that I end up in more misery, then that is my lot in life.
The enslaved individuals who were camp followers or behind the lines on the American forces, were they not cast out due to disease or illness or starvation?
One of the most notable would be Letta, who had stayed with us during our trek down to Virginia. And no, she had made the entire trek with us. Her and I stood arm in arm to make bread, to make sure that our troops were fed.
And yet, how was she free? Do the Americans not only grant freedom to those only who take up arms, so therefore only men who take up arms on behalf of the Americans? Sir Henry Clinton, a very close family friend, signed the Phillipsburg Proclamation in this very house when it was his headquarters, offering unconditional freedom to anyone who made it to British lines.
Well,
Not just those who took up arms.
ma'am, I would certainly worry more about your own members and camp followers of that army who look haggard and worn and just gross. I would worry more about the fact that those soldiers haven't been paid and that you yourself are starving.
I can speak as a former tutor to the Phillips family. How many people do your family enslave? Have you promised freedom to your enslaved people?
That is neither here nor there, Humphreys. Talk about betrayal.
She also owes land to Daniel Ninham.
What?
But she will honor these things because she believes in her king. And if the courts say so, and they say that Ninham shall receive his son, she will honor these things, unlike you, who when courts and decisions are given, you do not listen. You cross over the mountains and settle anyway. You go into places which is country not of your own, and you go there anyway. She will at least listen.
Do you expect the king to honor his word when he won't even give representation to his own people?
Yes. We have gone to speak with him many times.
Yes,
And he shall listen to us. He treats us well. And he shall listen to these things. Your people do not listen.
You are spoiled children. That is what you are behaving like, spoiled children. And there is no honor in breaking contract and breaking loyalty and fealty to those who have taken care of you.
The king broke his loyalty to us
The
when
king is the king.
he closed our representative assemblies.
The king
He took away our
is
rights
the
as
king.
free Englishmen.
A king is granted his position by God. Are you more than a god? Are you
He ignored
bigger than
the
God?
English Constitution.
A constitution is not of God. The king has divine right to rule over you.
And you ignored the reserved lands for many of our people. That is why we don't have Ascominoconsin anymore.
Those
Because
lands
you were-
weren't being used.
Those lands were our lands, protected. The colony of Maryland said so. But hungry people like you, hungry men like yourself, wanted Indian land full of corn and beans. These are things that you wanted, and you took this from us.
When you could have been tenant farmers for us. I mean, honestly, our tenant farmers are the best compensated in the colony. And yet, you could have been for us instead. You think you want freedom? You think
So
you
you
want
can
your
afford
own
to
land?
highly
Why?
pay
When you
your
can have a
tenant
landlord to
farmers.
protect you.
Well, to be fair here, I do happen to know that the Phillipses, in fact, Mary's uncle and her brother-in-law, had land in their Highland Patent area that was contested by Daniel Ninham and the Stockbridge Munsee.
That went through the courts.
and
It
How-
did go through the
decided.
courts, and it was very serendipitous that Beverly Robinson, your brother-in-law, pulled out this land deed that happened to have signatures on it attesting to the ceding of that land to the Phillipses from the Stockbridge-Munsee. However, when the Stockbridge-Munsees saw that land deed, they did not recognize those names that were signed there.
Well,
and it
how
has been
convenient
accused,
for
there
them.
has been rumors that it has been considered a fraudulent document, but one that you will nonetheless, you could be shocked. There could be a gasp there. So I am saying that there are, on both sides of me, there are contracts that are not being honored. There are human beings that are not being considered human beings on both sides. The king himself has not outlawed enslavement either in the colonies or certainly in the Sugar Islands. And the rumors of the Somerset case in England has been restricted only to that man Somerset and not to freeing slaves even on the English island.
It's much more than they've done here.
I can understand
It is much more
that.
than they've done here.
I think it again goes to the point of why we didn't choose sides. There are no winners in this.
This is very
How very
much.
convenient for you, Mrs. Ellison, to play both sides.
Is it playing or is it surviving? I'm sorry, Ms. Morris. I just have to bring that up because I want to talk a little bit about the treatment of New York City refugees under your husband's watch. Colonel Morris, as sort of he is supervising all of the refugees behind British lines in Manhattan. There have been rumors that your husband has been abusing his position slightly, and Mrs.
I take
Bloom,
great
since you are
offense.
there in Manhattan, you might be able to tell something different from what Miss Morris is about to say. I'd like to hear both.
My husband is a loyal British Army officer and a loyal subject of the king. He is simply following the rules that Sir Henry Clinton has laid out for him. People need to be strong friends of His Majesty in order to qualify for aid. They have to be known to us, and so they must submit their memorial with an endorsement by someone who is known to the Army. And if you cannot do that, then I am sorry for the rules. You cannot receive aid. You could be a spy. We don't know.
So one has to have a letter of endorsement in order to seek refuge behind the British lines,
Yes.
of whom Henry Clinton had signed a proclamation claiming freedom for any enslaved person under a patriot who can get to those lines.
I see the confusion. That is for white loyalists must have a memorial with an endorsement. I do not think our black compatriots must suffer the same.
But any white loyalist needs to have a letter saying that they are, in fact,
Correct? They must prove need, and it must be endorsed by someone who is known to the Army.
and how difficult is that for local tenant farmers who are fleeing their farms due to harassment from the cowboys and the skinners that are here in the county?
My brother, Frederick Phillips III, has signed many memorials on behalf of his own tenants. My brother-in-law, Beverly Robinson, has also signed many memorials on behalf of loyal Americans, guides and pioneers, widows. This is routine practice.
And those that come from New Jersey and other colonies?
Well, they should know someone in the military who can sign on their behalf.
Well, what I can say is I'm not too sure about loyalty in that way. But for black folks, what the mamas and the grandmamas would say is we just make do. We know how to work. And so my skill makes a way for me. The things that I can do make me useful and make me valuable. And so that is what I know will get me through. I don't need a letter. What I need a letter for, I can't read it no way. And I don't need anybody to speak for me, because once you taste my cooking, once you've worn something I've made for you, you don't, that's all the passport I need to get to where I need to go.
Well, and
so
if you are working, you do not need aid.
that is what we do. We have built this country, what you look out and see, built by these hands. So why would I need you to do anything for me other than let me be?
Mrs. Phillips, Mr. Humphreys, did you two ever think that you would be on
Mrs.
opposite?
Morris,
Mrs.
please.
Morris, pardon me.
Dear.
Mr. Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys, did you two ever think you would be on opposite sides of this war while you were... Oh,
I had no doubt of it while serving as their tutor.
Oh, please. You certainly enjoyed your time here. Partaking of our fine table, getting paid a very generous salary, I might add.
Oh, for
My
shame.
brother was devastated when you chose to betray the king as you did.
For shame.
Your brother would be best sent to the Simsbury mines.
He was already imprisoned. An old man. He is not in good health. He is far older than I.
Who passed messages to the British Army after being warned.
Ironic that the betrayer talks of being betrayed.
Is there anyone else here at this, on this stage who knows somebody or has somebody in their family who is on the other side of this war?
Well, Mr. Two Shoes could be my son.
Well,
I see him over there and I don't judge his decisions. I know that we have to make individual decisions when we don't have a voice. I still think he's making the wrong one.
I'm enjoying my freedom, so I think it's good where I'm at for now. You know.
Till they
let
have
alone
no
I get-
use of you.
Well,
And they put chains on your wrist again.
until I get captured by your side again, yes.
We will give you freedom.
No,
Great
that's what
Father,
happened. They captured me, they enslaved me. I'd never been enslaved in my life, and now I'm dealing with these chains.
They have filled your mind and your heart with lies. I do not believe these things.
Oh, no. I still have the scars. It was horrible. Thank goodness the Americans came by and freed me. It would have been, who knows how long I could have been there, and especially, you know, if the British decide to win. Then who knows what could happen after that?
The crown will promise you anything to have a chance at victory in this war, especially now after Yorktown.
As if you rebels do not do the same. Did you not struggle to raise your army such that you had to open your ranks to people you might not ordinarily consider?
Call it an army.
Did your
A
watch?
bunch of militia that run whenever they see trouble,
That
the
is
ragtags, a bunch of farmers who barely know how to hold their muskets, if you want to call that an army.
And
Yet
who
it
are
was
hungry
your
and beg
side
for
who
corn.
surrendered at Yorktown.
I'm
And
sorry.
what of Saratoga or Cowpens?
And what of
Our
every
army
other
can now
battle
fight
before
the
them?
British on equal terms.
You don't even have a navy. You are trying to fight the strongest nation in the world over some petty tax, whatever. Things that you don't know anything about are going on in the world.
And your Washington, did he not go to the Delaware and promise them to be the 14th state? Where is the state? I do not see it. But he said these things. He promised them these things. And the Delaware have given you men. They have given you food. Where is this promise?
Mr. Humphreys, Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys, you do know George Washington quite well. Is he a man of his word about what Mr. Corn had just noted?
The commander-in-chief, can I speak frankly?
Yes. What you say,
He knows this
no one will
man
pass.
lies.
I believe His Excellency is a man of his word, though he can be difficult at times, serving as his aide. I may have disagreements with him at times, but I believe General Washington.
We'll carve a 14th state out for these communities Mr. Corn has mentioned.
We will see, perhaps.
Perhaps, because
Yeah.
he knows there is lies in his words.
With all of the drama in his own family, how can you even trust him to lead you anywhere but to devastation? And I do believe that all of the tragedy he has suffered, he's brought on himself. His son or stepson might be alive if he had not done all of this.
He certainly could have easily chosen to side with his friends, my husband and my brother-in-law, Beverly Robinson, but instead, he chose to rebel.
and not kill half of his army because he doesn't know what he's doing and everybody fall into dysentery.
Mr. Washington may have known you, Mrs. Morris, prior to your marriage, but even your family family members have separated from your loyalist stance. And your Van Cortlandt cousins, your Jay cousins, and your Beekman cousins have also chosen to side with General Washington and his army.
The Jays in particular have been a disappointment. I know my niece, Maria Eliza, was very close to Sarah Livingston Jay, and so it has been hard for her as a young woman to deal with the loss of such a close friend. But John Jay has been extremely resolute in his views to the point where he's threatened my sister Susanna if her husband did not join his forces. It is one of the great disappointments of our family that so many have chosen to neglect and betray our king.
Typical of a slave-owning person to rip families apart for their own benefit. And that is what General George Washington is doing to this country, ripping families apart for his own benefit.
Which the Phillips family, who you ally yourselves with, have done too.
Oh, isn't that mature? They did it too, so I'm going to do it. Ridiculous.
Mrs. Osborne, I understand that you have met General Washington on a few occasions as well. How do you feel about the commander?
I feel like His Excellency will absolutely make sure on his promises to us, and he has been nothing but commanding even after the fleeing from New York City. He made sure that he would never put his army in the same position to lose them again. He has learned from his mistakes, and I believe that he will make good on all of his promises.
I guess he wouldn't put his army through the same thing. They're not the same men. It's not the same army.
But to learn from that mistake is great.
Oh, well, he's good. I hope he learns a lot because there's a lot of mistakes that he's made.
Mrs. Ellison, I know you've been quiet here. I wanted to ask you about how General Knox and his wife Lucy Flucker Knox have treated you and your husband while sharing your house, and the difficulties it must be having your house occupied while you're living together with them.
It's been quite difficult. It's just my husband and myself. We've had to give up half our home, but I do have to say, as we do consider the Knoxes to be our friends, after they left, we do continue to write to each other. I too actually do know General Washington. He resided at my father-in-law's house at the same time that General Knox and his wife were resided with us. He came by to visit with his beautiful wife Martha. They have been everything other than gracious to us. But again, we've suffered deprivations on both sides. My brother-in-law is currently in an American prison ship just by the fact that his father was the last royal lieutenant governor of this colony. My sister-in-law is trapped in New York City and was denied by the Americans to come back when my father-in-law was on his deathbed 2 years ago. So both sides we've not been paid for rent, we've not been paid for our trees, we've not been paid for our flour.
Oh, you have not been compensated for all of this that's
No.
been going on your...
No.
Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys, have you been aware of the situation with the Ellisons?
I've been working with Washington in Philadelphia to sort out finances with Congress, to try to sort out the issues we've seen. Unfortunately, this has been complicated by the British in New York City printing counterfeit currency, devaluing our currency severely.
That way you have to steal my land and collect rent from my tenants because you cannot raise from your own people.
If the American forces are so short of currency, can you, Mrs. Bloom, and Mr. Two Shoes be confident that you will be receiving a pension at the end of this war for the loss of, for your husband's work and for your own in the 2nd Rhode Island Regiment?
Do you mean Mrs. Osborne?
Mrs. Osborne? Yes, I do.
So I do absolutely believe that they will make good on their pensions. We are a new fledgling country. We are going to figure out how we are going to collect these taxes.
If you win.
Oh, yeah, taxes. Is that what you're going to do? You're going to collect taxes?
That's
Taxes that we
representation.
decide on that aren't decided from England.
And it may be all of us. You're British, I don't think will ever bring that into play, will they?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said it may be all of us who get to decide on these
Maybe.
taxes.
Maybe? Is that what you're willing to stake your life on? Maybe?
Well, my life was already staked. We're at least opening the conversation now.
Well, you already know what they will do. You're hoping they will do something different. What I see is that England is doing something different, and I'm going to move in faith that it's going to continue on. Your hope is based on your imagination. You have no evidence that they will do what they say they're going to do.
Maybe so. But England does the same thing. They just take, this is what I'm saying,
Is
they're
that
taking advantage
what
of
you
you.
guys keep doing
They will
is
tell
saying,
you-
oh, but this is what they are doing.
I've
I am
heard-
telling you, I am free because they said that I could be free. They have a plan to put me on a ship to take me someplace else. You have no such promise.
Well, they brought you here. I've heard of a whole regiment of black drummers on the English side. They,
Stay here
none of them
and
are from
see.
here.
Stay here and see what happens to you if they win in a year or two. I will be long gone from this place, and whatever awaits me, I have no idea what that will be, but I know what's in store for you.
Well, it seems like I've got a good deal. This is my mother's people's land. We've been here for a long time, and I was going to be here regardless after.
Other people's land? I'm sorry. What
He
is
is
he
a
talking
child.
about?
He only thinks of himself. He does not think of multiple generations ahead of him. He would see his brothers in chains. He would see them continued in chains. For what?
Well,
His
they're
children.
already in
And if you
chains.
lose this war, and
His
if you lose,
children in chains, his grandchildren in chains, his great-grandchildren in perpetuity.
Well,
You
I'm
know what
free
that
now.
means, Mr. Two Shoes.
I'm free now, and my children are
You
free.
are free,
at their leave,
right, because tomorrow you may not be free as long as you sit under those same people who enslaved you. What kind of mind trusts the person that they know did all these things to them?
the Great Father understands that you are Wangunk. Would you not wish to live with other Wangunk people in the Ohio country? In a country of your own?
I'm
with
not
your
only
own
Wangunk.
people?
How can
I'm
you
also
be?
African, and the British enslaved just the same. It makes no
But
difference to
they
them.
are releasing us someplace else where we do not have to be with the British. You
for
are
the
deciding
moment,
to stay here to live among the very people who for hundreds of years have enslaved you. It is unimaginable to me that you would trust that they
I've-
would keep their word.
My sister,
I've heard a rumor of what goes on in Britain and their other colonies. It's not much different.
My sister, if he chooses to eat their crust, leave it. He does not wish to listen.
It hurts me so to see someone who looks like me, my mirror image, so wrong and so far off the mark. Those people do not love you. They
I
never
have
will.
no idea how you won't take a chance for your own future. I understand you have freedom now, but you're new to this.
I have
Wait.
freedom now, but I am going someplace else to create a new world without all of this. You are going to sit here in all of this muck and mire with them who are sitting there arguing with each other over taxes that don't even have anything to do with you.
Well, I've heard a lot of people argue about new worlds. And do you know where the British intend to send you?
Absolutely. A wonderful place called Nova Scotia.
I'd never heard of it. Well, I hope it works out well, but I've been here and
I
I'll
know
stay
it
where
will.
I am.
I will make it work out well.
Mrs. Bloom, you have a young daughter. Is that right? If the American forces had promised you freedom, especially and protection for your daughter, would you think about that?
If the Americans offered me freedom to go someplace else, yes, of course I would take it. But freedom to be around Americans? No, thank you.
You argue that we built this land and now you want to leave? When you get to start prospering from it?
I don't believe that you can prosper next to your enemies. I don't believe that people who do not value your life and your humanity will ever change.
Well, this has been quite some debate. I am asking, we're getting ready to wrap up, so I would like to ask my guests here if there is anything that they wish to add to this conversation at this moment as we go around before I open this up to our audience as well. Lieutenant Colonel?
I believe we stand a good chance of winning this war. I will acknowledge our finances are our greatest danger, but with France on our side and the support of their Navy, we stand a fair chance.
Yeah. Didn't we just beat them?
You fight with cowards.
Mrs. Bloom?
So, I do believe that we will be prosperous, and I believe that all of my suffering and basically everybody else's war contributions, that they will all be announced, and it will be very, very beneficial for us all.
Mr. Two Shoes?
Well, as I'm quite old, I think I only have so much longer to live anyway. And I've enjoyed the adventure that life's given me so far. I do think that, you know, although George Washington is somewhat flawed, I've heard Billy Lee is his best friend from other people, but I heard from other people that they spoke to Billy Lee, and he says that sometimes. I think that we have an opportunity to do something different that hasn't been done before here, and we need to. Otherwise, we could deal with the same issues, and the Americans that are here are already being taken over by the British, so what are they going to do with us later on?
I'm just looking forward to everything going back to normal, back to a quiet home, back to sitting by the stream, doing my cross stitch, reading my books, having my husband not be terribly upset all the time over issues on both sides. We're just looking forward to the quiet.
Do you feel comfortable whichever side wins?
Whichever side wins, nothing will change for us.
Convenient.
Mr. Korn?
This war is hard on many of us. We believe if the great father of the English wins, he will uphold his agreements that he's made with our people for generations, and that he will honor our agreements. But if these colonists win, it will be the end of our way of life. It will be the end of our country, and the way that we live now will no longer be. All we can do is make the best decisions that we can for our people to make sure that our children live, and their children and our nieces and our nephew have a future. But it is hard, and I can only hope that the great father of the English and his warriors will win.
What I can say is that this land has been torn by war for as long as I can remember. Somebody was fighting somebody. Somebody was hurting somebody. All that I can hope for is that this becomes a better world for women. If I had a son, I might have stayed where I was, but I knew what was waiting for my daughter. I want a better life for women, whether they be the poor women like me or the women of money and means. Just a better world for women.
Well, I guess what do I hope for? I hope that Sir Henry and my brother-in-law, Colonel Beverly Robinson, managed to clean up the messes that Cornwallis has made and bring us back. I would like to see my beautiful Mount Morris again. I have not seen it in years. I've been stuck in New York City. I'd like to rebuild our beautiful city, come back here, get see my brother and sister-in-law and their children safely installed, and for my children to have the inheritance that my family has worked so hard to build.
Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure speaking with you about your experiences during this terrible, terrible war. So, folks, a big round of applause for these brave men and women. We're going to return to the year 2024. Billy-doo, billy-doo, billy-doo. Okay, we're back. Let me introduce the real people that are on this stage as well. Okay, to my left here, Chad Johnson as Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys. Kara Moore as Sarah Osborne. Stephen Thomas and his drum. Karen Pena as Catherine Ellison. Drew Shiptar Ravis, Black Horn. Leslie Bramlett as Lucy Bloom. And Sarah Wasberg Johnson doing the Mary Phillips Morris. And while we're at it, let me thank folks, our house greeter, Ms. Dora Bell, our refreshments hostess, Ms. Candy Barr, sound technician, Mike Raffone, and our videographer, Ben Zoom. Hi, I'm your host, Ben Thayer. What's that? I am getting there because next week, tune in for our episode for our Wayward Presidential Children with Mrs. Alice Roosevelt, along with Patty Davis, along with Thomas Jefferson's kids, all of them, Rita Coolidge, John Garfield, Cynthia Nixon, all these presidential wayward people. Oh, they're not? I thought that they, okay, never mind. Anyway, we'll have plenty of things to talk about next week, too. Now, audience, that's you guys. Do you have any questions for our 2020 forecast? So you can now tell them who won the war. I think they already know for that matter. But you can talk about the research that they've done, and if you've got any questions and clarifications, feel free. If you've got a question, allow Tiffany to give you the microphone.
This is for Mrs. Morris. Now, I heard you speak of your family signing these affidavits for loyalist refugees, coming to New York City. But I've also heard that your brother has mistreated some of his tenants who have chosen the American side. While you've written these affidavits, has your brother required any sort of public displays of loyalty for his own tenants?
So I'm not going to answer as Mrs. Morris. I'll answer as myself. So the British archives, the National Archives in the UK, has quite a number of the memorials. Most of them are not digitized, but often they will list who has signed them and who they're for. I do know that Henry Clinton's requirements to receive pay, basically you had to be, I think it's like most fervent friend or strongest friend of the government, which of course is the British Crown at that point. So that's part of why they have this, they can't just hand out cash and firewood and food to anybody, they have to have this mechanism by which you have to apply for it. A number of his tenant farmers are loyalists, and a number of them are patriots. People closer to New York City tend to be more loyalist. People closer to the Croton River, which is, the border of the patriot side, tend to be more patriot. But there are tenant farmers that their families are divided. One interesting thing about Fred III, we'll call him, is that he's kind of lazy. And he doesn't really raise the rents on his tenants. He doesn't change the leases all that often. He gives generational leases, so people are inheriting their farms, and his tenant farmers are some of the best off of all the manor lords for that reason, because they're kind of able to have some generational wealth and stuff like that. I have not run across anything specific about him going after patriot tenants, but I do know that, he definitely signed the Declaration of Dependence, right, and protests the Second Continental Congress and all that stuff. So he's pretty vociferously loyalist. But, you know, he leaves Phillips Banner Hall in 1777. So he's not really in any position to do anything about what choices his tenant farmers are making because he's in New York City. So, good question. Thank you.
Okay. This is a question for Mrs. Osborne. As you know, the term camp follower has become a rather negative one. Okay? It's often used today to simply mean a woman who followed armies in order to serve as a prostitute for the soldiers. So the reality I know was quite different. What, would a camp follower, a respectable lady such as yourself, actually do?
So, for example, a lot of the camp followers were women and children who were displaced due to British occupation, for example, in New York City. So if you look at the New Windsor Cantonment in particular, the majority of the women and children that are there are from New York City because they were displaced. So the camp follower accounts that I am familiar with, like for example, Sarah Osborne, again, she's married to Aaron. So, you know, there is no like prostitution going on or anything like that. Again, really what their duties were domestic duties. They were cooking, they were baking, they were washing, and they were mending. So it was really those behind those scenes functions that these women were fulfilling in order to keep those day-to-day activities going. That was really what, for example, what she was doing at Yorktown. Most notably, we see Sarah Osborne literally while cannons are firing, she is going and she is running food to the men who are in the entrenchments. And this is when she has one of her most famous encounters with Washington, where he asks her, you know, are you afraid of the cannonballs? And she says, no, the bullets won't cheat the gallows. It wouldn't do for the men to fight and starve too. So again, you know, at least in her instance, she takes this as like a very like personal responsibility on her end to fulfill those duties to make sure that, again, all of these behind the scenes functions are able to make the war effort continue.
So I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
The rumor of the camp follower becoming more about prostitution actually comes into play in the 19th century as people are talking about what those women did. But where you find the women in the documentation, they are women on the strength of the army. There are lots of documentation letters speaking about the women in general and speaking about them very specifically. And while George Washington's, all his letters, he's pretty annoyed by them because, you know, he also knows I have to keep them because if they leave, I don't have an army. He also, it's very clear if you don't work, you don't eat. And so these women are nurses. He's begging for nurses. They are cooks, and they are the laundress. And because the laundress is attached to 18th century health because she's washing the shirts, they are extremely important to the day-to-day, and there are more camp followers on the British side than there are on the American side. There are about 850 children, women and children encamped at Valley Forge with George Washington. So it's more useful to think of the Continental Army as a moving city. So the army came to your town, and everybody in town was like, time to go. We can make some money. We can get here. We can sell. And so you're selling whatever goods you are selling, but you come in with your candles, your
Fresh food,
fresh fruit, whatever you have. But in the army are the women who move with it. And if you're ever wondering who those women are, they are documented as camp followers and women on the strength of the army. Those are women that the army pays for. They belong with and to the Army.
Yeah.
And many of them are paid by the Army for different things.
You'll
Also-
see
And
sometimes,
all of them are fed by the Army.
you'll see occasionally the term women of the Army, and it's a much more accurate term than camp follower because definitely for the Continental Army, it's hard to picture the Army functioning and surviving without them. And even the British Army is relying heavily on them. They're doing, you think of the modern Army, how many logistics people do you have versus infantry? They're the logistics in many cases for these armies.
Yeah, and you'll also see women, not necessarily, I don't want to say disciplinarians, but almost like reining in the actions of the men around them. So again, for example, again at the cantonment, we see that people whose wives are there, you're able to stay with your wife rather than in a hut with 32 other men. But that's a privilege, and that's a privilege that can very easily be taken away from you of disobedience.
You have to follow the money. He's not sending anything back. There's no cash app. So if you want to eat, you have to follow your husband. And you may have started off with one child, but at the end of the war, you might have 6.
Yeah.
And in the case of, if you look across the continental lines, the largest number of followers of the Army is New York State, because we have, between the occupation of New York City, Long Island, all the stuff happening up in the valleys, New York has an incredible percentage of people who can't be at home, so they're with
Refugees.
the Army.
Right.
Yeah.
And Washington is basically constantly writing Congress saying, yes, New York has more people than they're supposed to have with the Army, but if you send these people away, I'm going to lose some of my best soldiers
Right,
to desertion.
Yeah.
Well, and also, they have more people from New York because that's where most of the big battles are
Yeah.
taking
And-
place. Right?
And once the British take over New York, many of the more affluent New Yorkers know we need to kind of get rid of our property the best way that we can. And that's how Hannah Till and Isaac Till become personal chefs to George Washington. They are both enslaved by different enslavers, and they lease the Tills to the Army so that they can continue to make money because they're both from New York. And Washington makes a deal to make sure that they can work off their bill of sale, and then he can pay them wages, and they both stay with the Continental Army throughout the war because they earn wages. And you find them because they earn the wages. You find them in his invoices. And that's how you find several women being paid for nursing, being paid for different things.
It's time for 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody? Billy? Oh, hold on. Wait for Tiffany there.
This one would be for Blackhorn. Would Blackhorn's people have been officially assimilated into the Longhouse, or are they kind of along similar lines of the Tuscarora? Or, how did that union come to be?
That's a really good question. So with my community, it's a lot of our oral, it's part of our oral tradition. So I added for my character some of my own history. I added some of my tribal history. I added some of our oral history in there. So I kind of did like a whole bunch of whole swirly things. So our oral history is that when our community broke up at the end of 1742, we broke up into 3 different segments. So some of our people stayed on the Eastern Shore, and they intermarried with colonists and free Africans. And their descendants are there today, and most of my community still lives in the Eastern Shore. Some of us went west, are believed to have gone west into what is now Ohio, Indiana, and probably now into what is Oklahoma. And then the other contingent is said to have gone north. They went through the flats, which is said to be where the flats of the Susquehanna River, and then they went north, to Canada. The oral tradition in my chief's family is that they went to Oswego. And Sir William Johnson in 1770 says, you know, who's the Indian agent from North America, says, well, where are all these tribes in like 1770? And he says, well, the Delaware are here, the Shawnees are here, the Nanacoke, where are the Nanacoke? He says, well, the Nanacoke are at Oswego. The Nanacoke are our kin. They are related to us. We're not the same people, but we're like really, really close to them. So it would make sense that, you know, our oral history with that is that we probably went with the Nanacoke and lived together with them. So what we know with the Haudenosaunee, and I've actually read a book from Ganawage that was a book on Six Nations law, and this was prior to them absorbing the Tuscarora, so it always references the Five Nations, So it's so the law that it's recording is prior to the Tuscaroras being absorbed in the 1730s. And in the law, it says that any tribe can become a part of the League if they accept the laws of the League, and then they pretty much dissolve being themselves and just allow themselves to be absorbed and brought into a wolf clan or brought into a guest clan. And it's a period of about a year of where you're watched, where people see if you're a good fit. And it's an entire like year-long process. And every chief from each tribe with the Six Nations, so every clan, has to come to unanimous decision of your inclusion into the League of the Iroquois. It's a big, huge thing. And I remember this book was only this thick, and it took me like a month to read, because it's legal text. It's all thick, super, super detailed legal text, and it was boring, but it was really informative, because it's legal jargon. So with our community, as far as we know, we were never absorbed into the Six Nations. Oswego was interesting because it was this mixed Indian town, I believe on the shores of Lake Ontario. It's very far to the northwest. But we know that it was a very mixed population of displaced people living there. So like part of my character is that, you know, living in the Moravian missions in southeastern Pennsylvania, but we know that there were lots, Heckwelder records, the Nanacokes all going through there, all these other Indians, some of them named, some of them not, all going through there, where they spent time with the colonists, they learned from the missionaries, they learned English and religion, German and English, and, you know, spent time with those colonists. And so we know, for instance, the Munsee that are in Canada are the descendants of some of those who are Moravians. They were Moravian Indians. They were part of like Moravian converts. So we know that like there are some lasting ties there. My own family too, and that's part of my family story. My great-great-grandparents were Moravians. They died when they were buried, they died as Moravians. So it's one of those things where it's really interesting when you think about the ties and relationships. But no, to answer your question, they were never part of the Six Nations, though they were probably living under a safety net, in the sense that the Haudenosaunee said, you can live in this town and we'll protect you as long as like you keep cool and you don't do anything stupid and you abide by our laws and our rules. Yeah, you're welcome.
Gloria.
Well, first of all, I think the presentation was absolutely brilliant. I mean, this is really the best example of living history that I've ever seen, easily. One of the things about the revolution that seems to me maybe a little bit strange is that there were all of very intense feelings on both sides during the revolution, but it just dissipated almost instantly when the revolution ended. I mean, you know, the French wanted to trade with the United States, but instead of going to the French, the United States chose England as their major trading power, and, you know, it just, all of that emotion vanished, which is kind of unusual with wars. So,
essentially civil wars.
Especially
right?
civil wars.
Think about our 19th century Civil War. People still have strong opinions about that.
Right. I mean,
today.
you know, the American Civil War still is kind of being fought even today, but this one, so far as I can tell, instantly disappeared.
The
A lot of that is because the really, really fervent loyalists leave.
Well, the other thing too is that for like, I can say like, as for like indigenous people, indigenous North Americans, there's a lot of impacts. So like one of the things that we talked about is like, oh, the king will promise you land. That does happen. So one of the things that happens, so obviously the Americans win, and the Mohawks lose all their land in the Mohawk Valley. Like it's gone. The Americans take it from them. And so what happens is that because Brant fought honorably for Great Britain, the Canada they give him a land grant, and they give him Brantford, Ontario. And so it's literally called Brant's Ford because the Mohawks forded the river to go to their land holdings, which is at the confluence of like the Grand River. I think it might be Brantford, then there's Grand River Reservation. But like that land, and it literally, you can read the treaty that like the British create. They say, for honorable service to the British government, we're giving you this land forever. No one can take it from you. Like it is yours for your family, for your descendants, forever. Yeah. Now, in the Mohawk communities, there's a lot of people hate Brant. Like they hate him with a passion because he lost all their land holding in the Mohawk Valley. You know, but in Brant's defense, he afforded them land that's theirs forever and theirs through perpetuity. So in his kind of defense, he's like, well, I may have lost our homelands in the Mohawk Valley, but I have given you a parcel of land that will be yours forever. You know, so I think though, like you say, it kind of dissipates. There's a lot of aftermath that goes on.
But to your point of it dissipating, it's between the Europeans, between the colonists, the Englishmen, European colonists here, and the Englishmen over there. The colonists during the colonial period are more British than the British. They love being part of that great empire. And once they separate, they still feel it is their birthright to be Englishmen. You know, that we still as Americans have a kind of, it's always Britain first. That is the center of the world. That's why you end up watching historical dramas that are based in France with English accents or Rome with English accents. We still occupy that space and love for Great Britain, whether we admit it or not as Americans. But they loved their monarchy. They loved being part of the strongest nation in the world. And so that's not easy to give up. And so once you say, okay, we're independent, we still want to mess with you. We still want your money. We still want your protection. We still want your friendship. And it's not until the late 19th century that Americans actually start to step into their own Americanness. And that is with the change of the guard, with the new money coming in, the Vanderbilts and everybody wanting to be a little more special. With the new money, like
well, that's talking about anglicizing. I think the Phillipses are a good example of that. Even though they don't stay, they go to England. Of the 4 children of that generation, Philip Phillips dies prior to the war. We think his kids might be on the Patriot side. We're not super sure. We don't know as much about the 5th generation. But Mary, Susanna, and Frederick all go to England. They're all compensated by the crown. Mm-hmm. They turn out to be small fish in a big pond, whereas here they were big fish in a small pond, right? But they all, they land on their feet. But they are ethnically Dutch. And it's really not until the 3rd generation, Frederick Phillips II, there's so many of them, gets educated in England. And by this time also, we're a fully British colony, and so the family anglicizes, and that's why they have such strong loyalties to the crown. I think that might play a role too, is people who aren't born in England have kind of adopted, as British subjects, this idea. Also, I think of the, British common law and things like that are not necessarily present in other countries. And also they speak the language. Where else are they going to go,
I'll also say 2 other points. Follow the money and trade. England is by far, what do the 13 colonies represent to England? A tremendous market to sell goods in and get raw materials from.
And
We
if they can't do it
struggle.
as a colony, they'll do it as an ally.
Yeah, we struggle all through the war in terms of the broadcloth for this coat, if it was original, would have came from France most likely. We did not have much of a woolen industry. Actually, Humphreys after the war will go on to import in merino sheep and set up the first successful woolen mill in Connecticut.
And that was the point. That was
Yeah.
the point with Great Britain. They didn't want us to be independent
The
at
Dutch
all.
too.
Yeah, they
There's
wanted
no
you.
textile manufacturing in the Dutch colony because they want you to buy it from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And
Lions.
English goods, they're cheap, they're well manufactured, and we go on to be a maritime power in terms of trading. But we don't have the Navy to secure the seas, so who's securing the seas? The Royal Navy. And then the
Also, Americans are way richer on average than Britons. So the average American is much better off financially than the average Briton because their society is so much more. Like, I'm talking about Mary Phillips being super rich, you know.
But that's
She's
why,
worth pennies compared to the British aristocracy.
But that's why they come here. This
Yeah.
is a land of second sons where there was only so much room and so much money that you could make in England. When we say Britain, sometimes we use that as interchangeable for England, but it's not. Britain is the Irish, the Scottish, but the Englishman in England only could do so much because he's landlocked. So he sends, now, my brother here might disagree, but he sends all of his people here where there's unlimited land and space. It's wonderful here. And so they do end up becoming wealthier because there are lots of raw materials, and they came looking originally for gold. There was no gold, but they found ways to make money with what was here and what they brought here, like me.
Well, and that's part of the reason, you know, we mentioned the Sullivan Clinton campaign. That is a big reason behind that push because in the French and Indian War, a lot of French and Indian War veterans were promised land, but you couldn't have land that was already held by other Europeans, which most of New York at that time was manors and large patentees and things like that. So if you didn't want a landlord, well, the other caveat was you couldn't have land claimed by indigenous groups, and that's basically the entire Mohawk Valley. So where are you going to go? You can't claim your free land, your land grant, because there isn't any.
Much like
We are a
Americans just break the rules they don't like.
yeah.
No.
I got to tell you, we are
Suck
a DS full of historians and teachers,
I know, we could talk
and we
forever.
can talk right until the next program. But I want to make sure you guys have a chance to eat something before we go on to the second one at 2 o'clock.
Thank you,
So I do want to thank everybody for coming today for our first performance. Come on back to Phillips Manor Hall and take a tour of the site if you haven't been here. We've got historic games next Saturday, is that right?
Yep.
That's right, thank you, John. So yeah, we do have things going on. We've got an events calendar downstairs. Pick one up. Check us out online. Thank you so much for coming this morning.